Everyone hates passwords. Your user hates passwords. Your admins hates passwords. But does everyone hates passwords? I love passwords. Passwords are weak. Passwords are reused. Passwords can be phished. Stolen password is easy to find or buy, and I get access. Your password doesn't matter.
Eller det var det meg, da. It's only me. Yeah. And I started in Norwegian again. Well, it's only me. I'm going to take off the cap as well. It's Jan Ketil. And as I want to talk to you about in this talk is that passwords are the weakest link in your security chain. And if you do only one thing to protect yourself and your organization today, and that is to turn on MFA now. So, passwords, they are expensive and insecure. 73% of all people reuse passwords. Even admins reuse password. According to recent reports, 65% of admins admits they are reusing passwords. I'm looking at you. That got you thinking, right? Are you reusing any passwords? Passwords are the weak link. Out of 100%, 81% of all breaches leverages stolen or leaked passwords. Data breaches are expensive. We all know that. And you don't want to have that cost in your organization. And we tend to forget this, but password actually generates a lot of support calls. So what should we do with the passwords? Before I start with that, let's have a look at how a typical attack on password might look like. So typically, we have the issue of keylogging, which is not the most used or most common attack scenario, but phishing is one of the biggest threats we see today. Around 1% of all inbound emails are phishing emails across the globe. And password guessing or password spray is typically around 60% of all leaked passwords comes from this kind of attack. So let's have a look at some passwords. I have a few passwords here on the sheet, right? Do they look great? I have some passwords here. What should we do with them? Let's just throw it, rip it apart, and just toss it away, right? Toss the passwords away. And let's do something else. As I said in the start, your password doesn't matter, but MFA, it does help. So to mitigate for those 81% of the breaches, let's add some multi-factor authentication. That can prevent 99% of all your identity attacks, leaving you behind with just 0.1% of the vulnerability you might have today. 0.1. So how do we do MFA? What kind of options do we have? Well, as first, there are free options for MFA in all Microsoft Azure AD tenants, even the free ones. You don't have to have a paid tenant to use multi-factor authentication. So the first method, I'm going to talk about the 3 most common methods first, and the 3 recommended, and it's Windows Hello. Windows Hello allows you to log on to your computer with your face or your finger. Super simple. It's convenient, and it's more secure than a password. The second thing we can use is a FIDO security key. I have one in my pocket. It's a bit small. Here. You see this little thing I hold in my hand? This is the one thing that are most phishing resistant when logging on to your services or your computer. All you need to do is to stick this in your computer, and you put your finger here on the fingerprint scanner on this FIDO key, as again, super small, and you're logged in. No password, no PIN code, so it's a combination even of everything. There are options here that doesn't have biometrics, that only uses a PIN code, but anyway, it's convenient, and it's one of the most secure methods to log on to your Azure AD. The third option I want to talk about is the Microsoft Authenticator app. It's here on my phone. It looks like this when it's locked. This allows me to do MFA securely from my phone. So where do I typically have my phone? In my back pocket. So it's always with me. MFA does not need to be hard. And then that gives us the three primary and recommended ways of doing multi-factor authentication. And then we have some other options, like hardware and software one-time password generators. And at the end, we have the one that's most commonly used, but not most secure today, and that is SMS and voice. Even though SMS and voice is less secure than the other options, it's way much better, way better than having nothing. So, as we said, passwords are the weakest link. And if you want to do one thing today, enable MFA. So Azure AD has support for a broad range of multi-factor authentication options. Broad range. We talked about the Authenticator app giving us push notification on the phone. SMS and voice. It's not the best option, but it's way better than having nothing. Soft tokens, one-time generators, it's there, you can use it. It's not commonly used, but it's a good option. And hard tokens, OTP. That's the pure MFA options we have. Let's add some more on top of this, right? Let's include the passwordless technology. Passwordless, you say? Yeah. If you log on through Authenticator app on your phone and uses that to challenge you with a challenge response, you don't need to have even your password typed in. You just do a passwordless authentication. Windows Hello. No password. Just my face or my finger down on my computer, and I'm logged in. No passwords. And again, back to this small little magical thing called a FIDO key. Super small, and it's super secure. Biometrics. So biometrics can be a part of Hello, it can be a part of FIDO, or it can just be biometrics. For instance, on your phone, when you actually do the passwordless on an iPhone, it will also apply Face ID or Touch ID to complete the successful logon. And again, this will protect you from 99% of the attacks, leaving you behind with 0.1% of the vulnerability you have today. Isn't that great? I think it's great. But what is MFA? Let's talk about ways to enable MFA. And I want to talk about 3 ways to enable MFA. So the most recommended best practice, and I do hope you use this, is using this through conditional access. If you have the licenses and the ability to run conditional access in your tenant, do this to enable MFA. It gives you the option to be granular. It gives you the option to define when and where the user are challenged for MFA. And you can give the users a great user experience when they work, even though MFA is enabled. Keeping the productivity at pace even though your security is here compared to maybe down here. Security defaults. So if you don't have a license, you can't use conditional access. That's when you should use security defaults. I'd like to refer to it as the sledgehammer approach, meaning is you just use this big hammer and just turn it on for everything. There is no exceptions. There is no rules you can define, but it does protect your tenant. In fact, all new tenants you set up today comes with it turned on by default. So you don't even have to turn it on. But again, if you have the license, use conditional access. And last, we do have the option to do a per user account MFA. Don't do it. It's the old legacy way of doing MFA, where you go into either admin.microsoft.com or going to the old MFA portal. Don't use that option. It's not a good option. It will not apply to any of the rules. It will not apply on your secure score. It doesn't look good and it doesn't work great. The user experience, you will break it. It will enforce MFA in all kind of weird scenarios. Don't do that, please. So let's move over to talk a little bit about conditional access. So if you do MFA and more with conditional access, when you define a conditional access rules, you have the option to assign this during sign-on to any group or user or group of users in your tenant, to any kind of application or all applications in your tenant. So we can apply rules that user A sign on to service B, he will get MFA, but if he comes from a known location or a known device, then maybe he don't need to do MFA this time. So requirement for MFA can be based on stuff like location, type of selected application, real-time risk, device state, which requires an Intune license, but that allows you to look at what's called a compliant device. Saying, hey, I come from a device, my phone is compliant, it is enrolled into Intune, I apply with the policies, no MFA. I think this is great. And then, when you enable this, the user will be prompted to register for MFA at their next logon. So you don't have to tell them to do this, but of course you need to tell them how to do this. So telling your users in advance, you are doing this, we are enabling MFA, this is what you need to do, create a user guide, walk them through the process. So the process is pretty intuitive, but your user needs to know this is going to happen. So to get started with MFA, I'm going to give you a list of some common recommended policies that I recommend you to start with. Number 1, block legacy authentication. This is the one and number 1 that you should enable. If you do nothing else, except of course enable MFA, block legacy authentication. 99.999% of all password spray or guessing attacks are still using basic auth. So if you block this, you will raise your security level high just by doing this. Require MFA for admins. Yeah, you say, that's obvious, right? Everybody does this. No, they don't. And I'm looking again at you. Probably you too know about admin accounts that doesn't have MFA enabled. So please protect your privileged accounts. They are crucial to your security. Next, require MFA for Azure management. So you're saying, yeah, okay, I protected the admins, and you need me to protect Azure management as well? Yes, because if you're doing stuff in Azure, you don't need to have a privileged account, or you don't need to have a role in Azure AD to be, for instance, a subscription owner, having access to all kinds of resources and data and infrastructure that you have in Azure. So all access to Azure should be protected with multi-factor at all times for all your users. And this is important as well. Require MFA for all users. This is like on level 4, this is where you can start to get granular. This is when you can take those rules and really start being granular. Application A, location B, and see, does the user need to do MFA if they come from a compliant device, if they're in the office? By the way, don't trust the office network. Think zero trust. This is where you can get granular and talk about and define what is the MFA requirements for my organization. Require compliant devices. Maybe you want to do this for all access to all your Azure AD integrated services, or maybe you just want to apply this to a set of sensitive application containing critical data. This is up to you. This is where you need to define your rules that works for you. And in the end, as I talked about, when you apply these rules, the users need to register for MFA. Do you really want them to register MFA from anywhere in the world? If your users haven't done this yet, somebody might try to phish that account and register MFA on their behalf from a different country, a different world zone, or definitely some place you don't want to. We actually also see now phishing attacks where they try to first phish the user to log on with multi-factor, and then the attacker goes in and registers their own MFA from a different location. We can control this with conditional access. So that gives us a total of six policies. With those 6 policies, your security is going to be so much better than you have today. And it's only 6, right? It's not like I'm saying you should create 20, 30 policies. I'm talking about 6 policies. That's doable for anybody. Some other considerations. Break glass account. There are a possibility that you can lock yourself out of your tenant if you do misconfiguration of conditional access, or you can have instances where Azure MFA is down and you need to get in with one account. So you should create a separate break glass account to cater for these kind of situations. We do recommend excluding this account from all policies. No risk scoring, no conditional access, no nothing, no MFA. You should always just get access straight in, username, and password. So what do we need to do with this account? We need to ensure the password is super strong. We need to store it in a secure location and monitor it. Make sure you know every time this account is being used by anyone, because it's a non-personal account even, right? So with no rules means that anybody in the world, if they got the password, could log in. So we need to monitor it. But it's not only the break glass we should monitor all access to our services. So monitor your identities is crucial. We have sign-in logs in Azure AD. We have secure score for identity. We have real-time risk with privileged identity management and Azure AD identity protection. And we have log analytics. Make sure you monitor this. And you can also define your alert rules so you get an SMS or phone call or whatever if somebody tries to log on with your break glass account. When you have all this in place, I think you're ready to take it to the next level. But before I do that, I want to tell a short story. There is a customer of us, and for some reason, I don't see the map on this slide right now. So if I guess you don't see it either, but this is supposed to show America. So this customer works in the US. They are doing business in the US, and they don't expect anybody to log on from anywhere else in the world. We started monitoring their identities and their sign-ins, and then we could see logons from South America. We could see logons from China, South Africa, and then all over the world. Lucky for them, as you can see here, they were all yellow. Nobody actually got access. But we were able to see this happening. And you know what? It was non-MFA users, and they used legacy authentication. And the reason we found all this, of course, is by monitoring the identities. So now, let's talk about our end goal. My end goal in this session is you to try to think even further than multi-factor authentication. I want you to think about going passwordless. I talked about it already, but it's a standard-based private key authentication. It's more secure and more convenient than using any password, and also with MFA. We have Windows Hello for Business, we have Microsoft Authenticator, and we have the FIDO security key. 3 options for doing passwordless authentication. So remember, almost everyone hates passwords. I hate password. The guy you saw here in the start, he doesn't hate passwords. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan Ketil. So, we have our crossword.
Yes.
What is the key takeaway word for your session and why?
You want to have a guess? It's passwordless.
Passwordless. All right.
Yes.
Yeah, almost didn't guess that.
No? Almost no, right? So why? Because, like I closed in my session, it's the most secure, most convenient way to log on to your services.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.